What's up, guys? Well, what you're about to see is a great conversation that I had with a Red Pill Philosophy subscribing member. Subscribing members, basically, you pay $3 a month and you get all types of exclusive access and content, including a monthly Skype conversation with me where we basically spend an hour and we can talk about anything. If you have any questions about life, any advice that you'd like to get out of me, any insights, or any questions you'd like to ask, or just to chat, that's part of what your $3 a month will get you with a Red Pill Philosophy subscribing membership. It also comes with a weekly exclusive podcast, it comes with a weekly free newsletter, behind the scenes footage, deleted content, extra scenes, all types of stuff. It's like 10 cents a day, and it helps support what I do, and it gives you all types of cool exclusive content. So I hope you enjoy this conversation with a Red Pill Philosophy subscribing member. If you're interested, you can go to my website, redpillphilosophy.com/members, and you can sign up for a membership if you'd like to and get all the cool content. Thanks a lot, guys. Hey everybody, thanks a lot for tuning in to this video conversation for Red Pill Philosophy. I'm joined by a Red Pill Philosophy viewer. Now, the pronunciation of your name is something that's been boggling me for the past 2 weeks.
It's Fairuz, but it was spelt wrong on my birth certificate. So it's officially spelt Fairuz, but it's actually pronounced Fairuz. So.
Okay. So, Fairuz?
Yeah.
Alright, finally got that done. Okay. So how have you been?
I've been good. I've been actually really good this weekend. Yeah, I've been quite busy. I start back at uni on Tuesday, so I've sort of been preparing and reading, and it feels quite nice to have something to do. Fills my mind up. Yeah. So.
Yeah. So what's it like in London? I mean, I've interviewed a couple people from London in the past. Yeah. And what are things like there?
In what way? Sort of.
Well, I don't want to ask you the cliched, how's the weather, but how is the weather there?
It's shit.
It's really shit. Yeah.
It's been a really nice summer, and weirdly, last week was beautiful. So, like, it was really crappy, then it was really beautiful, and it's back to being shitty again. But I love seasons, I really do. Like, sometimes, like, I wish I was just in permanent heat, but it's autumn now, and I think you call it fall. It's really beautiful. Like, you know, the leaves are all going greeny brown, and you know, beautiful. So yeah, I love it.
Yeah, we don't get that in Miami. In Miami, it's basically hot and humid.
Right.
It rains, and then it's hot and humid again for like the rest of the year. So it sucks. It sucks pretty badly.
Do you like that?
You know, I love sunshine. Like, I need to be in a place where there's like a bright orb of light in the sky every freaking day. Like, I can't stand like cloudy, depressing weather. It drives me fucking crazy.
Yeah, no, that's true. I do feel like it's harder to get out of bed when it's not bright outside.
Well, you know, like when it comes to like depression, I heard that in certain very Arctic regions of the world, I forgot where it's mostly just snowing and cloudy. Yeah. There are laws, they have to paint all walls in bright reflective colors to enhance the amount of brightness, because suicide rates are actually higher. In those regions, so it's pretty trippy.
Well, they have in all the Scandinavian countries, they have a really high alcoholism rate because of like they've got like really stringent rules selling alcohol, just because it's such a huge problem, probably because of depression and stuff. So yeah, I can totally believe that, definitely.
Yeah. It's amazing the connections between, I mean, just you smoking a cigarette. I mean, would you say that you smoking a cigarette is kind of like a way to fill the void, so to speak? Because I know you struggled with depression in the past. You think that's where it's kind of originated from?
Probably. I mean, like, I felt when you were sorting all the technical stuff out, I was sort of twiddling my thumbs, and I just instantly just grabbed a cigarette. And yeah, most of the cigarettes I smoke are needless. They're just me sort of doing something, because I'm just doing nothing, sort of thing.
That's funny because Louis C.K. yesterday. You heard of Louis C.K., the comedian?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah. So I tweeted out yesterday. He was on Conan O'Brien's show, and he basically did a hilarious 5-minute piece about how like modern society, we can't just sit still and enjoy silence. Yeah. Like, we have to pull the cell phone out and start social media.
So true.
And it was fascinating to hear him talk about that, and to make it actually really, really funny. For me, it hit a chord, because like I could sense he kind of got it like pessimistic. He talked about how part of the reason we don't want to sit still and just be quiet is because in that silence we're forced to reconnect with the kind of like that quiet, sobering little fact of reality that at the end of the day, when we all die, we're all alone, as he puts it, which is a bit pessimistic. I don't know if he's that pessimistic about it, but yeah, it's interesting. So I wanted to ask you, and you don't have to go, any more personal than you'd like to. You can censor it as you'd like, but according to what you've been emailing me recently, I guess you kind of took some of my advice. You took some of my input into perspective when it came to like depression. Could you maybe just inform my listeners on since you've been talking to me, what have you been getting out?
Well, you mentioned that past life regression, which I found quite interesting actually, because obviously, you're a product of, your history and your past, and it's something that I've been in therapy for years and years, and it's something that I've found very hard to go into, mainly because I don't remember a lot. I'm sort of very good at putting things away in boxes and never thinking about them again. And coincidentally, at this place I work at sometimes, I met someone who actually does that therapy. So she did a session with me, and it's weird because actually I think I've done it before, but it was similar to this thing I did years ago in my early 20s, and it was something like inner child's therapy or something like that. But it sort of had a really similar, that was in a sort of group, I think there was about 6 of us in a group or something. But this was it sort of did this similar thing. I don't know, I suppose it was hypnosis, they called it being in a meditative stance with this other thing. But so they sort of she did this visualization thing with me and sort of regressed me, and it sort of it just made me have it was really powerful, because I really felt in that position like I was there, and it sort of it just made me remember a lot of stuff, and it sort of made me sort of realize a lot of things that I've been denying to myself, and mainly for other people. And that's what's weird, is most of the stuff I go through because I don't want to tarnish someone else's memory or be disrespectful to someone else, so I sort of damage myself. And I'm very good at denying that anything is anyone else's responsibility. I always sort of think it's my fault, I've done something wrong, this is my problem. But that was a really useful, that was a great suggestion, because it completely, and I felt really stupid afterwards. I thought, God, this is so obvious, why haven't I seen this before? Why haven't, it was stuff to do, with my relationship with my mother and stuff, and because she died when I was quite young, I don't want to think anything bad of her. And sort of, it made me have to acknowledge she wasn't perfect, and she sort of, her behaviour damaged me, and I found that, I've always felt this fierce loyalty to her, I have to really defend her memory, and that stopped me from really looking at our relationship. And the reality was, our relationship wasn't a very good one, and I just sort of thought, God, this is so fucking obvious. I don't know why I've never. And I think when I did it before, I'm so cynical about everything that sort of, remotely might be spiritual. I'm so into science and evidence and, all that sort of thing, that when I did it before, I was just, too blinkered. Throughout most of my therapy, I was probably too blinkered, just thinking, oh, this is all fucking bullshit. So that was a great suggestion, so thank you.
Yeah, the whole thing with the science conflicting with spirituality, it's really important to me, because I came from the empirical kind of scientific viewpoint, and for whatever reason, I think it's because I'm more open-minded, I have inevitably come towards more spiritual views of the world. My openness to what might be possible has brought me closer and closer to a spiritual understanding of the world, just because of things like the causality problem. I don't know if you've seen my videos on the Big Bang and some of the problems with science. The idea that this world is materialistic, deterministic, and that we have it all figured out from a logical standpoint, well, there are inherent logical flaws with the mainstream science approaches, including things like the Big Bang, for example. The Big Bang doesn't answer where we come from. I mean, it might answer how the universe developed, but it doesn't tell us what came before the Big Bang or what came before the thing that came before the Big Bang. These are all logical requirements in a causal, materialistic, deterministic view of the world. So that alone has always had me scratching my head, and that's one of the reasons I don't think science today has sufficient answers, and why more and more I'm leading towards a spiritual, whatever you want to call it, consciousness, all that stuff. The idea simply being that there's more to life than we are currently aware of, and to close off what else is possible beyond this current paradigm is limiting not only us as individuals, but it's limiting our ability to understand what's really going on, which in turn can benefit you, can benefit our lives individually. Just like with you, for example, in the past you may have been a little bit more close-minded to not even spiritual ideas, but simply to things that aren't as concrete as we're told, like, oh, just take your medication and you'll be okay. Those are the concrete ways to do things, The idea that you can just mess around with past memories in your subconscious and that could actually physically change how you feel today, that's a little bit more wishy-washy, kind of concrete. So,
that's true.
Yeah, there's a whole world beneath the everyday concrete reality that is made up of our thoughts, of our emotions. These are things that affect how we interact with the physical world, and they're just as important as a mountain or a skyscraper, these solid concrete physical things. Emotions and thoughts are just as important. So that's really cool what you say. That's very important.
I mean, like, because I came from a completely opposite thing. I was brought up in a very religious household, and so I think part of the reason I was so close-minded was reacting against that. But as you get older and you experience more things, you do. I mean, obviously there's coincidences, but just certain things, the way you connect with certain people, the way you sort of feel towards someone you might never have met, you might have just read something, amazing, and I don't know, just things like that. They're just these connections that sort of go beyond any sort of physical anything, and and I think that's there must be something in the human body or mind or psyche, whatever you want to call it, that creates that. I don't think that, if we were so closed off, like just all these autonomous beings everywhere, we would be able to connect that well with other people, and I think, there's no one can prove that God doesn't exist, because the concept of God in itself takes that possibility away. But it is hard to, I don't know, and that may be coming from ignorance, but sometimes you sort of think it is hard to sort of imagine that there's nothing else. But then when you sort of see humanity for what it is, when you look at, genocide and war and, even economic disaster, stuff like that, you sort of do feel, the coldness of humanity as well. So I don't know, it's a difficult one. It's,
Yeah, totally. It's the combination, there's a difference, there's obviously a difference between spirituality and religion. Religion is a lot of times the bureaucratic, dogmatic approach of twisting spirituality into an engine to make money or to centralize power. We all know this is pretty stuff, So, I mean, I'm going to ask you, well, we'll start like this. Do you have, is there anything in specific that you'd like to ask me, or any insights, or anything that you'd like to ask me? Because I have a lot of questions for you, but is there anything that you wanted to kind of talk about specifically?
Not specifically. I mean, I suppose I'm quite interested in what it was that made you start, your website and doing these videos and stuff. Like, was it something specific or just like a progression of?
For me, my awakening, so to speak, began in like about summer 2009.
Right.
I stumbled across an Alex Jones documentary. Have you heard of Alex Jones?
I saw him ranting on Piers Morgan. Yeah.
Yeah, he's that crazy guy. Yeah. Crazy, but I think he's onto something. No, yeah, he made a documentary called The Obama Deception, which I watched in
Right.
2009, and
Yeah.
it basically, it was, I guess you can say I've always had kind of a little whisper of an intuitive voice in the back of my
Yeah.
mind that's always known that 90% of the way things are today is shit.
Yeah.
But the pressure from society gets to you, and it
Right.
gets you to conform to society as opposed to honoring that little voice in your head that is raw and genuine to you.
Yeah.
So when I watched this documentary, it really clicked with a lot of the stuff that I'd known deep down, but didn't
Yeah.
accept because I was all alone.
Yeah.
So that documentary, I was blown away by what he said. I'm like, this can't be true. So I Googled like every 2 minutes, every time he
Yeah.
made some bold statement about conspiracies and what's going on. I Googled it and it seemed like it was
Yeah.
pretty verified. It was pretty solid stuff. What the
Right.
fuck? But what happened to me was more importantly than his documentary making sense was that it clicked with everything that I've always known at a deep down level. And it
Right.
answered all the fucking questions. Like, just like on economics, for example, I'd always been told economics was this complex thing that you can't understand,
Yeah.
and you have to go
Yeah.
to school for many, many years to ever understand it, which is why
Yeah.
we need the Federal Reserve uh, banksters controlling the money
Yeah.
supply because they have to make sure that our economy is good.
Yeah.
And in awakening to this whole libertarian kind of Alex Jones view of the world,
Yeah.
was I was exposed to a new type of economics, which is called Austrian economics. And
Right.
that version basically says that there are fundamental principles that drive an economy,
Mm.
and as long as you know
Yeah.
those fundamental principles, you're
Yeah.
pretty much going to have a more solid view of economics more than anybody else. And lo and
Right.
behold, that's exactly what happened. And Austrian economists
Yeah.
have been predicting economic
Yeah.
collapses for the past 40 years. These people are on
Right.
point. Not only are they
Yeah.
right, but they're fucking predicting shit in
Yeah.
advance. So to me, that's a pretty good track record that indicates to me that they're onto something. So that's
Yeah.
basically what happened. You know, I watched the documentary. I did many years of just on the internet watching videos, um,
Yeah.
getting exposed to all kinds of interesting ideas, some of which were probably a
Yeah.
lot of bullshit, others which were pretty good. Um,
Yeah.
and and then eventually I found a voice that talking those
Yeah.
kinds of things. I've always liked helping people, um,
Yeah.
but I think in the past I don't know, I've talked about this before, but I think when you help people too like selflessly,
Yeah.
they don't really respect you. It's almost like they just use you. So
Yeah.
really what red pill philosophy is a way for me to help other people, and then
Mm.
they can help me back by supporting me, whether by becoming a
Yeah.
member or watching my videos and sharing it and all that. So it's a more
Yeah.
mutual, respectful kind of assistance
Yeah.
plan. And that's what I'm doing here today. I'm just ranting in front of
Yeah.
a camera, as you've seen many, many
Yeah.
times, and that's basically how I awoke, so to speak.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so one of the things I would love to ask you is
Yeah.
during your regression, it was regression. Is that what
Yeah.
hypnotherapy? There's a lot of names for it.
Hypnotherapy,
Yeah.
regression.
You didn't go
Yeah.
like into past life crazy land, right? You didn't.
No,
Okay, cool.
I didn't.
Oh, good.
I think I'd have been really dubious if someone tried to take me into a past life.
Yeah, you think so?
I think, yeah, I think I just I don't believe in it. I don't. I
Yeah, I
just
mean, you
don't.
know, it's interesting. I read the book Many Lives, Many Masters, which I think you heard in the video that I made about you or related to you. Many Lives,
Yeah.
Many Masters is a book where he was a scientist, he was an empiricist, he didn't believe in religion, he was raised in a religious household,
Right.
and he didn't like it, and he had a patient, and the
Mm.
patient had fears of like drowning, fears of sharp objects, and it was
Right.
crippling her. It was crippling her with anxiety, and she'd
Okay.
have to sleep in her closet because she needed
Right.
an enclosed space to feel comfortable. She was basically debilitated. Her whole life
Right.
was in shambles, and so he was already doing hypnotherapy, you know, taking a
Mm.
person through their life, and eventually he
Yeah.
took her so far back through her childhood that he actually pushed back into a past life of hers.
Right.
And
Okay.
it turns out that she had drowned in like a tsunami,
Right.
in a past life, and her child was with her,
Right.
and they both died, and it was shocking. And then that's why she had a fear of drowning in this life.
Right.
And look,
Okay.
I'll give it to you.
Uh-huh.
It sounds far fetched, and it's very hard to empirically prove it. Um,
Yeah.
but say in the video, nonetheless, let's ignore whether or not it's true. Let's just look at the results. Does it help
Yeah.
people
If it
overcome their fears?
helps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at right now. It may not be true, but it
Yeah.
works pretty fucking well, and it certainly works better than like a lot of the medications that people are taking. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so so I'm just curious, what was it like? I mean, what did it feel like to be taken back through like deep memories through your life? What was that like?
It was really scary. It was really I felt really sort of young and helpless,
Mm,
and I felt I really like there was one memory I sort of had, and like it's actually one of the few memories that I can remember. I don't really want to say what it is, but um, I remember it with no emotion, and sort of I actually sort of going back to it and feeling that emotion was very difficult. It was I mean the only way I can describe it is, sort of being back where you are at that time where, things are happening, and it wasn't all bad. It's certain, things that I sort of went through, which, I sort of, it wasn't, they weren't necessarily traumatic, but I was myself in them. And I suppose that's the trauma of it. It's I don't know, it's hard to explain, but yeah, it was scary, and it felt, because you're not unconscious, because you're aware of what's going on as well.
yeah.
That's quite weird, because you're sort of aware of what you're doing, and it's sort of like you're in two states, which is really bizarre.
Mm,
And it's sort of like the only way I can, it's like if you suddenly, I don't know, like someone suddenly, if you were on drugs or something, and someone suddenly slapped their fingers and you're awake and you're back to normal and you're thinking, fuck, what did I do? Like all that,
mm,
it kind of
right.
feels like that. It's sort of, you know, it's a bit sort of, I think you'd have to really trust the person you're doing it with. I think it's something that, I mean, it took me a good few days. Like I was in tears for like a good few days
Wow.
afterwards. I was really traumatized
And
by
why
it.
was that? Why were you in tears? Because it really like brought up a lot of the old stuff.
Yeah, and it just reminded me how horrible I used to feel. It just
Wow.
sort of, it's really sad when you sort of, you can sort of, like the further you are from a situation, you sort of start to remember it differently and change it in your mind, and
Mm,
make it less and less painful, I suppose. And when you go right back to it and you're right there and you feel you're right there, it's so incredibly painful.
yeah.
And it's and because maybe because I'm an adult now, and I have control over my life, and I wasn't an adult then, it feels more painful, sort of, because it's sort of like I can't do anything about it.
Mm,
That's,
very
you know,
interesting. So
so,
I'm
but I
I'm
mean,
curious. I'm curious, like how you so it provoked all these feelings, and you were basically pretty distraught for the next few days.
yeah.
Um, how did you feel after those few days, and how do you feel now? Like, what has been the overall path? I'm just curious.
Um, I think, I sort of, I think now right now I'm sort of at a place where I've accepted stuff. It doesn't feel good, it doesn't feel comfortable, but there's that sort of part of you where you think, well, you've got to carry on. You're living, you've got
Right.
a life, but, and it's sort of, do you know what? It was just really nice to be able to acknowledge that my mum wasn't perfect, and that there's stuff that happened that I haven't really even remembered, thought about, been able to communicate, that really affected me. And that, that was really painful, because part of me felt like I'd opened something up that was never going to be closed, that's never going to close down again.
Mm,
And I felt really guilty, I felt really bad. um and but also part of it, made me realize actually that you know, this thing I always forget, you know, is that I was a child at the time. So how much responsibility can I really take for certain situations?
You can't take
And
any,
it was,
pretty much. I mean,
yeah,
I mean, what are you
yeah.
gonna do?
It's true, and I look at my son and I just sort of think, you know, like he's almost 15 and still I would say he probably doesn't have that much responsibility. Like I wouldn't put so much responsibility on stuff he does. Only to a certain level that, you know, he's still a child. So that sort of helped me as well. You know, sort of like, you know, just sort of putting things in perspective again. So
Right. Sorry, my
that's all right.
fucking cat just tried to jump back in the
Oh,
house and crashed into the window. Jesus Christ.
oh.
Sprinklers turned on and she had a panic attack and decided to try to jump back in, but the window was closed.
Oh,
I'm so
those
sorry.
cats.
Right. So yeah, I mean, it's you know, we've talked a little bit in our little exchanges about
Yeah,
you know, I think the most probably the one of the most important components of the whole regression slash hypnotherapy
yeah,
stuff is to at least become as conscious and re-aware of
yeah,
what has been causing you to feel so bad for so long.
yeah.
So at least when
Great.
you remember, oh, that's the chain of events. That's the
Yeah,
chain of thoughts that has led me to how I feel today. At
yeah,
least then you can see it, and maybe you can see it with new eyes as an adult,
yeah, yeah,
as a person who maybe is more informed about things, and maybe now you
exactly.
can look at it and maybe you can make a more conscious choice on how to address it. Maybe in the past when you
Yeah,
were a kid,
yeah,
the most you can do, the most you can bear to do was to push it away and try to ignore it
yeah,
or rationalize it, or in your
yeah,
case, blame yourself and feel guilty.
yeah, yeah.
And you can probably see, looking back, that maybe that wasn't the most rational choice. As a child, how
No,
can you be blamed
wasn't.
for the mistakes of your parents?
Yeah.
And so,
But you know what? I
yeah,
think it's such a normal thing. And actually, like, you know, when I think about it, I think, you know, there's like I know it's probably a generational thing as well, but so many children are brought up with a sense of responsibility that they don't deserve put on their shoulders. You know, so many like so many children told to, you know, grow up and like, you know, when they're six and, you know, act more appropriately and stuff. And they're children and, you know, it's sort of insane in a way, the way, you know, children have been treated like
yeah,
historically. And, you know, and I came from a family where, you know, I suppose you know, you did as you were told and you behaved and you fell into line, and if you didn't, you were punished. And it's you know, and I suppose it's no surprise that, you know, I felt like I was responsible all the time because I was told all the time that, you know, it's my behavior, it's my
yeah.
problem, you know. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah. The child's at fault, not the parents who
yeah,
sustain this
yeah,
terrible culture and this terrible system. No, it's the
yeah,
kid's fault. Don't question the dogma
yeah,
of
yeah.
the adults who
It's
determine
very true.
these
Yeah.
ruthless standards.
Yeah, so I mean, it's quite insane. I know like things changed a lot now, you know, children are sort of put as a priority, you know, their thoughts and feelings and views are a priority in things like custody cases and care proceedings and things like that. But, you know, that's very new thinking, like if you think about it. So,
Hmm.
yeah, it's
How are
but you know,
you? Yeah, go
no, I
ahead.
was gonna say it's something like if anyone does it, I think I need to do it like quite a few times before I sort of get the full effects from it.
Yeah,
I don't think it's a one-off thing.
yeah, no, I agree. And you know,
So
you spent how many years suffering from this? I mean, your whole life.
since I was 13, probably,
There you go. So since you
maybe
were
longer. So God, I don't even want to think how many years
so
that
the
is.
majority of your life is
20 over 20 years,
so you've spent
yeah.
over 20 years
Yeah,
um, thinking a certain way, feeling a
yeah,
certain way, judging yourself a certain way.
yeah,
Um, the way I see it, this is the point in your life where you have to start shifting the momentum in the opposite direction. Your whole
yeah,
life, the momentum is towards blaming yourself, feeling bad
yeah,
about yourself, feeling guilty, negativity,
yeah,
depression, all these feelings.
yeah,
Now it's time to unanchor your sense of
yeah,
self and your past judgments from I'm at fault, I made a mistake, and you're
Exactly,
you're
yeah.
gonna get burdened down by the past to now you have to start
Yeah.
reshaping your life in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably just, I mean, yeah, like you said, I don't think anyone would feel good in one hypnotherapy session
No.
if they felt
No.
bad for the past 20 plus years. So
Yeah.
it takes time, but I guess the most consoling thing to say is that, well, here you are, we're having a
Yeah.
conversation about
Yeah.
health. You've been taking a few steps to improve your
Exactly.
health, and
Starting.
all of these are like little symptoms of what is obviously a change internally. Because if you
Yeah.
didn't change internally, you wouldn't be making these choices. So the way I
That's
see it,
true.
it's the beginning of better things. It's the beginning of moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
I wanted to actually read into real quick
Okay.
because I was listening to an audiobook by a woman named Claire Weeks, and so basically her work basically helped get me out of anxiety.
Okay.
Totally like saved me. At the beginning of the year
Okay.
in January 2013, I spent the first 3 to 4 months almost paralyzed by anxiety. And
Right.
I'd had this before. Back in
Wow.
2005, I'd suffered from similar anxiety slash panic attacks, but it was gone
Okay.
for many years. But it came back for whatever fucking reason. And I tried basically everything. I tried all these websites. I tried.
Yeah.
I went to see a therapist, and she tried to get me on medication. I
Right.
resisted, and
Yeah.
even her therapy, like talking to me, didn't work. It was
Right.
just failed miserably. A lot of times I left the
Yeah.
therapy feeling worse than when I went in.
Okay. Yeah.
And so I spent money on this, so much research. I had to resist taking the
Yeah.
drugs. And one night, in my
Mm.
panic, incapable of sleeping, I Googled looking for some answers, and I stumbled across a website
Right.
called panicend.com,
Okay.
PANICEND, panicend.com. And basically,
Okay.
that website offers advice for people who struggle with anxiety using,
Okay.
yeah, using the views from this anxiety expert. Her name is Claire Weeks. She's dead now, but her books are still very popular. And the
How
book,
do you say her second name?
yeah, so it's Claire, and then it's WEEKES.
K-E-S.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Claire Weiss. Her work is, I mean, I've only gotten her for audiobooks, but
Yeah.
so basically the website, which is based on her work, the website basically says if you want to overcome your anxiety, simply face it
Yeah.
and accept it.
Right.
And I did that, and literally
Isn't
with,
that easier said than done?
well,
Or is
actually,
it?
no, it was actually as easy as it was to say it, almost literally. Now, it took
Really?
time, but
Okay.
yeah, it was actually pretty amazing. And there's a lot of logic behind it that uses an understanding of what causes anxiety and
Right.
how we perpetuate it. It uses a lot
Yeah.
of logic that is, it's counterintuitive, but it
Yeah.
actually ultimately makes the most sense. So,
Yeah.
basically, I was feeling pretty crappy that night, and I found this. I'm like, hey, let me just try this. I'll try anything at this point. I can't help it. So face it and
Yeah.
accept it. So I'm lying there in bed. I'm tired. It's the middle of the night. I'm feeling very anxious, and I just start applying this mentally and emotionally. And
Right.
within probably about 2 to 3 minutes, that peak of tension that I was feeling began
Yeah.
to slowly dissolve and melt away. Now,
Okay.
it's hard at first to believe it's that simple because
Mm.
you've spent 3 to 4 months worrying. Some people spend years,
Yeah.
and it's hard to believe that that's all it takes. But the reason it works is because anxiety is largely self-perpetuated. You
Yeah.
keep
That's true.
fueling it because
Yeah.
you're afraid of being afraid. You're afraid of something that might happen that's mostly
That's true.
irrational and made up in your head. It was basically face it and accept it, blah, blah, blah. And it worked really well for me. It took me like 2 weeks
Okay.
of consistently applying
Right.
this approach, but it just melted away more and more and more
Okay.
until I just felt perfectly fine. And it would come back every now and again,
Okay.
mostly because I was just over worrying about what if it comes back, which is the most
Right.
arbitrary thing to worry about. And
Yeah.
and I would just apply it again. It would melt away further. And every time it came back, I just applied again. It further and further away. And then now I'm pretty much chill.
Okay.
So here's what she writes in her book, Hope and Help for Your Nerves, near the end. Now the book is mostly about anxiety, but she gave a little bit about
Yeah.
depression. So she wrote this.
Okay.
When you first feel that sinking feeling of depression, you should have courage to let the feeling come. Relax toward it. Don't tense yourself against it in fear and dread. If you feel apathetic, depressed, try to understand that this is a reaction that has been fostered by habit and memory and encouraged by emotional and even mental tiredness. Don't run tensely, blindly from the thought of depression with your mind closed against it in fear. Don't drain your emotional reserves still further by indulging in those devitalizing emotions, fear and despair, especially. Work at a steady pace, your usual pace, so that you can take time to think calmly of yourself, think calmly of your work, and especially take time to think calmly of your depression. I don't mean that you should sit and wallow in your depression. By all means, take every opportunity that arises to help cheer yourself, help recharge your emotional batteries, but do this at a normal pace, at a steady pace. If while out, you forget depression for a while, don't be too cast down if you remember it. If you accept that your batteries are flat, that emotions will swing up one minute and down the next, your acceptance will cushion the shock of remembering depression and then protect your emotions from your own onslaught upon them and give your body a chance to heal and replenish its stores. Your body will heal depression just as it will heal a broken leg if you give it a chance. So she goes on even further and she elaborates a lot further and goes into more detail. But
Do you know what? That's so true. Do you know? Because it's making me think about, when the resistance towards therapy is not wanting to feel bad, is feeling bad is scary. But the whole thing is you're meant to just go through it and, feel it, and then it gets better. And it's the same sort of thing, isn't it?
it's funny.
You know,
It's funny that the bit because I think that there's a bit of there's a blur between anxiety and depression. I think a lot of
yeah,
times they kind of flow into each other and they feed each other.
definitely.
And I actually remember feeling a little bit of depression when I was feeling anxious, and so it's strange what's going on there. So my curious question
Yeah,
is, can depression be addressed in the same way that I address my anxiety? And according to Claire Weeks, she basically says that, I mean, I didn't get to finish the entire part in depression yet, but she
yeah,
basically goes in that direction. She goes in the direction of
yeah,
acceptance, of not worrying about it, not getting bogged
yeah,
down by it, but to kind of step back and to accept it, because
yeah,
it's with anxiety, it's the
mm,
worrying about it, getting bogged down by the anxiety that
yeah,
kind of perpetuates the cycle. So maybe
definitely.
depression could be addressed similarly, maybe by stepping back and accepting instead of feeling bogged
Yeah,
down about it, but just accepting it.
yeah,
That's kind of like the gateway to that tension between what you feel and what you're bogged down about,
yeah.
which is the depression itself.
I mean, it's not too dissimilar. And don't get me wrong, the NHS is far from perfect, and it's been sort of like, especially with the recent government, they've sort of tinkered around with it a lot, and made a lot of changes, made it sort of closer to private healthcare. But when I think of government, I mean, I think no one's naive to think that corporations don't have an
Mm.
influence in government. Um, I think, I think maybe, I think, I think it's not as pronounced in the UK, and it might be because, well, I don't want to say this because it might not be it might not be true. I think people in Europe tend to be better at sort of holding governments to account, revolting, sort of rioting, marching, protesting, whatever. Maybe like I think um, I think I think we don't have. There seems to be more of a level of respect for power in the states. From that's how it looks, anyway, than there is necessarily in Europe. Um, I, I mean, but then you sort of look at the history of America, and that sort of contradicts that completely. But it just like from sort of an outer perspective, like there's you know, so I mean, like, I don't know if you heard about the MP expenses scandal that happened in the UK, and it got revealed that, you know, MPs were sort of fiddling with their expenses, the expenses scheme, and, you know, buying loads of stuff that they're not meant to be buying, and there was this whole, like, you know, outing in the media, and, you know, loads of people got sacked and had to pay money back and things like that. And admittedly, the new system put in place hasn't changed a lot of it, but it's made things more transparent. And I think, I don't know, I think there's just more of a, I don't know, it's a smaller country. It's not split into separate states either, which probably makes it a lot easier. And so, in that sense, I don't know, it's sort of, it feels like you have more of an impact politically for some reason. That's how it sort of, you know, feels. It feels like, you know, the government is sort of, I don't know, it just sort of feels like they're easier to hold to account here. It was like, it was a disaster for the Tories over here. Like, it was reported as a complete disaster. David Cameron lost, you know, the vote. He, you know, completely ballsed it all up. And then
what was like?
it was, it was, yeah, it was viewed as a win for the people because no one wanted to go to war. But it wasn't, it was sort of viewed as disastrous between UK and US relations. That's how it was seen. And then like, I don't know how, like, somehow, like, the PR machine starts turning. And hang on, I'm just going to turn the
Yeah.
light on. It's getting a bit dark.
Oh Lord. Propaganda.
It's getting dark. What time was it there?
It's 12:37 p.m. here.
Yeah, so it was like, I don't know how it sort of turned and changed into you know, like a bitch slap to Obama because it was seen as a fucking disaster.
Mm.
But it did turn.
Oh, that's
It's insane, isn't
yeah.
it?
What sector of like if you're talking about like the libertarian kind of awakening, like
Yeah.
the American empire aspects of America,
Mm.
we viewed it as a massive victory. Now the mainstream media is still just a mouthpiece of the empire, the American empire, and all the
Yeah.
fascist control. So from that perspective, it was reported and it was perceived as bad. For us, like
Yeah.
people who aren't interested in tyranny taking over the world, we
Yeah.
viewed it as an awesome victory. Good job,
Yeah.
you guys rocked it. Heck yeah,
Yeah.
for standing up. Awesome. But of course, mainstream media in America did not report it
Yeah.
that. They viewed it as like,
Right.
how could you not support us? Oh, the chemical attacks, the dead people. Oh my God, you don't care about the
Yeah.
kids. That's how they
Yeah.
reported it. So fuck those people.
Is it? I mean, it was. Yeah, it's definitely a victory because no one. I mean, that's why so many MPs voted against it because their
Beautiful.
constituents were completely against
Beautiful.
it, but it was seen as a disaster for the Prime Minister, definitely at
It's
first.
a beautiful thing.
It's interesting. But then apparently Obama called David Cameron, and so that made it all right, and their relationship's still special or whatever. So yeah, but
Motherfuckers is all I gotta say.
I know. They're all the same. I mean, like, you know, I remember when Labour got into power, it was the first time I was old enough to vote, actually. It was my very first vote, and it was so exciting because I'd grown up under, like, Thatcher and then John
Mm.
Major, just the Conservatives, basically, and it felt so exciting, and it was so disappointing that, you know, all these years later, it's still, you know, nothing really that much has changed in a lot of ways. It's your day-to-day experience of life isn't hugely different, and that's really sad.
Yeah.
It's sort of, there's not much, you know, there's nothing to vote for, there's no choice, there's no, you know, no one. It's hard to care sometimes, even though you should really care. You just sort of, you know, there's just no one that, you know, I can think of that, you know, sort of like spurs any interest
Yeah.
in me enough to sort of support. So,
Yeah.
you know, that's sad.
Yeah.
That's
I don't know. Like I don't even see the point in the voting anymore. Like
no,
it's a strange way to get what you want. Like it seems like a strange
yeah,
way to get what you want. Like, you're gonna vote for some
yeah,
guy every few years who you never
yeah,
met. You're gonna drop
yeah,
a mark on a piece of paper. You're gonna put the vote ballot
yeah,
in the vote box, and you're
yeah,
gonna cross your fingers and hope that some extensive mechanical bureaucratic
yeah,
process the guy that you
Yeah.
scratch the check mark on a box for is going
Yeah.
to get elected, hopefully because the
Yeah.
people around you agree with you. And then, if he does get elected, then the people who didn't agree with that guy, well, you're going to force those people to comply with whatever policies and
Yeah.
approaches to the world you support through that candidate.
Yeah.
Because that's what happens. You get some leaders in place, and they
Yeah.
force everyone to comply with certain standards.
Yeah.
Even if your neighbor disagrees with you, you're going to force that
Yeah.
upon them. I just think the political system is so outdated. It's so archaic. It's
Yeah.
so like ancient, and I
Yeah.
think people can do way better.
I think so. I think also it's so unrealistic to think 4 years is enough time to create any meaningful change in a society. And it's I don't know. I always think like a benevolent dictatorship is sort of the best way to go, but I don't know if something like that could ever exist because it just takes so long to change things and see sort of outcomes of policies and stuff like that. It's just not. It just is a ridiculous system. There's not enough time, and it's always the same old people that get in all the time. And I don't know, but
Yeah, it's a generational process. Change is not significant. Social change doesn't happen in 4 years, 4 to 8 years.
No.
It's so laborious to change paradigms. It takes so many old people dying. Like that's step number one. Old people,
so
you gotta die. I'm sorry, you have to die. You're old, you're outdated. It's time to go.
Yeah.
So it takes a lot of people dying from age. There's a lot of new people coming in and then replacing the old system. It's an extensive process.
Yeah, it's true. I think we should. I don't know. I think government is just a bit of an outdated idea anyway. And democracy is like, no, you don't really get democracy, and I don't know even if democracy is the best way to go. Like, the whole idea of majority rules. That doesn't make sense a lot of the time. It depends what the majority's ruling on. It's
totally. Yeah, it's mob rule. The majority of the people in Nazi Germany supported Hitler.
Exactly.
And look what they got. They got total chaos. So I think there's a better way to do it. And a lot of times, like, I kind of wonder if there's a spiritual consciousness kind of bit of an empirical way to find the best way to structure society. That's stuff I haven't even begun to consider, so I'm not even going to try to articulate that. I've made that mistake in the past. I made a video once going after atheists, and I hadn't properly articulated the idea, and I put it out there, and everybody hated it. It was terrible. So I actually deleted the video because So I've learned my lesson. If I haven't fully fleshed something out, I'm not going to talk about it.
You're not going to talk about it. Okay.
So I have a few minutes left. Is there anything else that you'd like to ask, or anything else you'd like to talk about, or anything?
Yeah, I just wanted to, the other thing I suppose that's a huge difference is the whole gun culture as well.
Wow.
And obviously, you can own guns in the UK, but only in certain circumstances and stuff. It's not part of the society or anything.
Yeah.
And it's another thing that seems weird is this sort of idea that if there's lots of gun violence, the answer is more guns. Versus stopping certain type of guns, but not all guns.
It's funny. You and I are coming from two totally different universes. But it's so cool. It's so fascinating to me to see this. Two separate human beings from different environments trying to interpret the same thing and getting different results. It's so interesting.
Completely, yeah.
Yeah, so, it's actually the same logic here in this country. With universal health care. The same reason we don't want that is pretty much the same reason that we don't want guns taken, because the people who are going to come collect the guns are the same fascist psychopaths who want to kill us.
Right.
So from that perspective, it's kind of like, it doesn't seem like a good idea. And then, at the end of the day, my only question is, why does the American government why should they have all the guns? I mean, and hey, look at the American empire. Look what the American government has been doing, using guns, bombs, bullets, chemical weapons for the past 40 years, invading countless countries without good reasons, blowing shit up. If the problem is violence and dead people, why aren't we taking guns from the government? They've killed more innocent people. The American government has killed more innocent people all around the world, including cops in the United States. I mean, I think it's 21 times more likely to get killed by a cop in America than by a terrorist. But we're supposed to worry about disarming American people when you've got the government itself killing so many people, when you've got overseas invasion. So the best explanation I have for why we see things different is because our governments are different. The American government is a psychopathic entity that cannot be trusted.
You can say the same about the British government.
But is that really true? Because I mean, how can you sit there and tell me that you support your government taking all your guns while saying our government are psychopathic freaks?
Well, I don't know. Like, I was just
it
thinking
seems like
as
a
you were
contradiction.
talking, like maybe there's sort of a culture of paranoia in the States, or maybe we're not paranoid enough. I don't know, but you could say, like, I mean, the British they colonized like loads of the fucking world, and enslaved millions of people and killed millions of people. But the police don't have guns either. Only like there's certain police that have guns if there's a gun attack or something like that. But most of the police don't have guns. And I don't know, like if you just look at gun crime statistics, it's sort of like, to me, it looks like, well, the reason there's so much gun crime in the States is because everyone's armed. I suppose
guns don't shoot themselves.
the idea of the government turning around and shooting us all hasn't entered my head that much, and maybe it should enter my head a lot more. I don't know.
Well, I mean, it's looking at government. It's looking at the American government for what it is. It doesn't have any. It has no logical, rational, or moral reason to justify taking guns from us while they use guns to kill how many innocent people every year. So who are you to tell us we can't have guns when you're the first one on a psychopathic shooting rampage, except you got way bigger guns, way bigger bombs, bigger tanks, and all these other things that we, the people, do not have. So that's kind of the place that I'm coming from. Is like, how can I trust you of all people with hoarding all the guns?
No, it's true.
So that's where I'm coming from, and that's why. And it just doesn't seem like a solution to me. Taking guns is the worst solution on the list. Yeah, you can take all the guns, but that's not a solution. And I hear that in the UK, they took all the guns, but people are still killing each other with knives, bats, rocks. I mean, they're doing anything they can to kill people, because the problem isn't guns in reality. Like, if you had a society of Buddhist monks,
the problem is people, definitely.
Well, absolutely, the problem is people. I mean, go armed. Go to a temple in India where there's a bunch of Buddhist monks meditating on peace and kumbaya. Arm them and come back a year later and tell me how many of them killed each other. Probably none, because they're humble, they've overcome their ego, they're very peaceful people. Now go drop a bunch of guns off in some rundown neighborhood with a bunch of people who are scrambling to get by every day for just a bite to eat, and you'll see those guns used consistently. So the problem isn't the guns, the problem is the people. And the way I see it is taking guns from people who don't want to use them violently, but just want to use them to like defend themselves from the violent people, which you could make an argument that violent people are violent because they're desperate, they live in poverty, and they need to be helped. That's a good argument. But the idea that our government, killing so many people, going on these rampages, is going to come in and take guns from us when it's such a double standard, it's such hypocrisy to say, you can't have guns, but give them to us because we'll probably use them to go out and kill more innocent people overseas. That's just something I can't wrap my head around.
I don't know,
Now, I don't know what the cultural differences are like in London. I don't know what things are like there for you. I don't know, maybe your government isn't that bad. I mean, hey, they bitch slapped Obama in the face. So maybe you guys are better off. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, this is how empires fall historically. Rome was great, and it collapsed because they became too decadent, too successful. And it wouldn't surprise me if that's what's happening to America. We became so successful, we became ungrateful, we became decadent, and now we're just these debt the accumulating, war-launching psychopaths, and maybe other parts of the world are better. And I've heard that before. Switzerland, I've heard, is a great freaking country. Like, people are very peaceful there. In fact, I hear in Switzerland, they have like the lowest crime rate and murder rate, but every house is required to have a gun in the home. Like, it's a law. You have to have a gun in your house in Switzerland. But it has the lowest murder rate and gun violence rate in the whole world. So again, it comes back to the people. It's not about the guns or the access to the guns. It's about who are the people who are trying to access the guns. And if you ever have a country with a lot of violence, well, that's the problem right there. It tells you what the problem is. There are people that, for some reason, maybe because the institutions in society aren't helping people, you know, find sustenance, or maybe it's too many prescription pills, or people don't like their jobs, or these shitty sitcoms they watch all day. I don't know what it is, but a lot of things that are coming together to affect people. And for me, it's just, the solution is so much deeper than just taking guns. You have to find the roots of the problem.
That's true.
You know?
But I don't know. I mean, you know, there's loads of violence here, and it's just a different culture. So, you know, like, you know, it's not even an issue, I suppose. But, you know, it's exactly, you know, you're right. It's the people, and why are people violent and turning to crime? And it's the same all over the place. Poverty is usually like the #1 reason. So, you know, so. But,
yeah, you gotta find the root of the problem.
So,
all right, so is that our chat?
I suppose, cool.
All right, yeah. Well, it was absolutely
You too,
cool
and
talking
thanks
to
for
you.
your advice and stuff. And
Yeah, I think we click a lot. I think you and I are kind of on the same wavelength or whatever.